What's up, everybody? What's up, MGTOW? So this video is going to be on the Femi boomers. Now, this is just a trigger warning to all you snowflake baby boomers, because I know that you guys really hate it when anybody suggests that you guys might have had things a little bit easier back in your day. And yeah, I get it. All you guys had to play with was wood and balls. But still, in my defense, I actually did have to walk uphill both ways from school, since it was on the opposite side of a valley. The boomers like to say that the succeeding generations had it much easier because we had flat-screen TVs, the internet, and iPhones. But really, what would you rather have, an Xbox or a father? Money means a lot of things to different people. However, fundamentally, it's for two things: to exchange objects, mainly commodities and other value-based items, and to incentivize and or convince other humans to perform actions. The main reason another person would perform actions in exchange for currency and or barter trade is an expected future use of the stored value of the items or currency. In the case of commodity barter, if I exchange a stick of butter with you for a bag of flour, there is no social contract or future promise of any kind involved in the transaction. The only limitations is how long the stick of butter lasts or how long the bag of flour lasts. When it comes to fiat currency, however, state force is needed to ensure the future use of the currency, making fiat currency socialist by nature, due to the central planning needed to regulate money printing and also to enforce the social contract of the fiat currency itself. In any case, at the end of World War II, the United States was, for the most part, the only first world country left with working factories. Russia, England, mainland Europe, China, and Japan all had many of their major cities destroyed by the war and its many bombing campaigns. At the end of World War II, the marriage rate, as you can see here, per capita, rose to the highest point still in the recorded history that of these 144 years, which was 16.2 per 1,000 people, or 1.6 per capita. 20 years later, the quote-unquote baby boomers themselves sustained a much higher marriage rate than their children, although much lower than their parents. So, now what I contend in this video is that the baby boomers allowing for globalism is in part to blame for the loss of male sovereignty through the loss of economic political power, which translated to a loss in socio-political power. Everything has its trade-offs, and when it comes to these things, I suppose, in the case of globalism versus nationalism, I would venture to say that you're looking at a trade-off of stuff versus control, respectively. For example, after World War II, when the US was producing a large amount of stuff, you got paid less but had more purchasing power. And beyond that, when you bought something from another American, it was increasing the economic power of someone who lived in your nation. Now, World War II is a good example because there was no need for trade protectionism, because no other countries had factories. So then around the 80s, we can see on this chart the slow downturn of the marriage rate and also the ramping up to the highest divorce rate in this recorded history. Can this just be a coincidence that as all the manufacturing jobs left in the United States, marriage fell apart? But people had more stuff than ever. More TVs, more phones, newer phones, cheaper cars and appliances. As the generations shifted from those who were alive when the US was the only country with factories to all the factories being outside of the US, international corporations consolidated trade power into the hands of a tiny hegemony of international businesses, which then turned on the US and used trade differentials to devalue the purchasing power of US citizens. Not by devaluing the dollar, but by exporting the jobs to other countries, thereby leaving less jobs for people, and more specifically, making it more difficult to create independent businesses, which businesses are what give people power within the state to bargain with the government. Because there's no way to compete with an international corporation that owns your government and sets the laws, it gives the citizens much less political power. And then you get the system we have now, in which international corporations set the laws in your country for the benefit of themselves and create a hypergynocentric system in which hypergamy is set up to 11, forcing men to spend more and more rather than save more and more money. This is due in part to the ease of divorce, and these divorce laws are set in part by international corporations that own the government and own the lobbying firms, and a lot of the feminist lobbying firms are getting money from these huge corporations that also support feminism, and then they support the lobbying firms that push through laws like no-fault divorce and yes means yes. And I've shown in videos that Me Too is completely corporate-backed. So no-fault divorce is making it that the only way to satisfy a wife is by satisfying an ever-increasing demand for stuff. Women also prefer the system that disempowers men politically, making men compete for women, while women always have a welfare state, which is protectionism, to fall back on, and it also eliminates a huge portion of male bargaining power in the marriage contract, since the woman can just leave at any time without any consequences. In essence, the only bargaining power a man has in his marriage is to offer more stuff. The jobs that have been exported are the jobs that can be done by average males. So this is part of the problem, because if you create a society where 80% of the people are considered losers, I don't think that those people's fault, but you've created a death trap, not a society, because a society is supposed to be there for the greater good of the majority of people. But if you're telling me that only the top 20% of people, which are basically freaks because the norm is the 80% in the middle, then you have created a eugenics machine, not a society, not a culture. The new jobs that are supposedly being created are service-oriented or sales jobs that can easily be done by women, allowing women to replace men in the workforce, thereby giving them even more political power. And on top of that, the same multinational corporations are implicit in female preferential hiring practices. The same multinational countries that pull ads from MGTOW and other right-wing channels and journalists to stop the message of male empowerment and male sovereignty from spreading, because that's antithetical to their whole plan of putting women in charge and just turning men into a working slave class to satisfy hypergamy, and then they skim taxes off the top and get all the money from all the consumer items that are being bought. As for the women themselves, they've traded off having a loving husband who will provide protection, children, food, and shelter, and in modern times, due to modern appliances, a lot of free time to pursue her interest, all just in exchange for wifely duties. But instead, they've traded that for a boss who doesn't care about her, her kids, and a 40-hour work week. Plus, she gets to bang random chads and sugar daddies until she either gets knocked up or hits the wall, and then is stuck being a brave and stunning single mother while still working 40 hours a week with her kid in a daycare center. That is until her kid starts school, at which point she'll put her kid on psychotropic drugs, and she'll buy him a new Xbox. So brave. So stunning. But the one smart thing women did do is put price protections on the pussy. No-fault divorce is price protection, and it even allows for a non-guarantee of delivery of services, whilst at the same time guaranteeing payment for services that aren't even delivered. That's what I call a racket. And if you even think about demanding the service that you already paid for, well, that means you're a mean misogynist of a customer. And you shouldn't even think about trying to steal the product that you already paid for. Basically, you only really paid for a chance to win the product you paid for. Kind of like a lottery. Only the lottery holder gets to decide if you win or not. It's not even random or up to chance. So, you can kind of say it's more like an auction to see who can beg like a dog the best. And also, welfare is another set of price protections on female value. So, females not only have in-group socialism, but also price protections on their SMV. And for some reason, it seems to be working fine for them, even though most economic theorists would say that this doesn't work, that price protections don't work, that socialism doesn't work. But for some reason, it seems to work for women. I'm not sure how that works. But in any way, we can kind of see how, I'm not saying that the baby boomers themselves did it, but the politicians definitely slid in and sold the country off to multinational corporations, making it so that only the top 20% of people have any real value or political value in the system that we now live in. And you can see with the rise of populism and socialism that the rest of the people are pissed off about it. And they're not going to just sit down and lay down and take it while a tiny group of basically freaks in the society try to take over the whole society and kill them all off. But that's just my view on the topic. Other than that, have a good day and go MGTOW.